This is The Moneymakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and a great pleasure this week to have welcomed to South Africa Arianna Huffington. Not only did she found the Huffington Post, which she subsequently sold, but she's now running a new business that is called Thrive Global. It's a business that strives to put people around the world to sleep. But you do. That's precisely what you're trying to do, but not through a boring way.
Well, not actually just put them to sleep, but recognize the pandemic of stress and burnout that the world is suffering from. And look at the new science that shows us that when we actually take time to recharge ourselves through sleep, through pauses, through disconnecting from our technology occasionally, we are more effective to end the collective delusion that in order to succeed and be productive, we have to be burnt out, because this is a delusion completely disproven by modern science.
Your epiphany was, what, 10 years into the Huffington Post?
2000, no, only 2 years
Only
into
2
the
years
Huffington
into the
Post.
Huffington
Yes,
Post.
I founded the Huffington Post in 2005, and in April 2007, I collapsed from exhaustion, sleep deprivation, hit my head on the way down, broke my cheekbone, came to in a pool of blood, and I realized that I wasn't alone, that millions of people are burnt out. Some people have episodes much worse than mine. You know, they end up with heart attacks. They end up with incidents that destroy their lives. And that it was time for us, when I say us, I mean all of us around the world, to course correct and recognize that human beings are not machines. The goal of machines is to minimize downtime. But for human beings, downtime, time to recharge, is actually not a bug of the human operating system, but a feature. It's essential, it's needed, especially if we want to be creative and productive, especially when we want to be effective leaders.
Now, the idea, I think most people's idea of the most perfect workplace on earth is the Googleplex. I don't know if it is, but do they have it right? It seems to be everything in one place. You can get your dry cleaning done, you can have a nap, you can go and play some foosball if you want to, and you do lots of work. I think their hours are a bit longer than you might approve.
Well, Google has a great culture, but we're talking about something even beyond that, which is establishing boundaries in our relationship with technology, because this is now really the biggest issue in front of us. We have all become slightly addicted to our devices, and we have a hard time disconnecting from our devices and reconnecting with ourselves. We see that in our children. Your children are still young, but wait until they are teenagers. When the battle starts, parents are trying to take their phones away at night when they go to sleep. That has to start earlier. It has to start as soon as you give your child a phone, and you have to role model it. You know, right now, parents urge their children to disconnect occasionally from their phones, but they don't model that behavior.
No, they don't. Parents are as more guilty. They create the role models.
Exactly.
Guilty as charged.
So we need to change that, because you can't tell your child, put your phone down when you go to sleep, when you are, or when you are having a meal, when you're actually surreptitiously often trying to text under the table.
Do you have a camera? Do you have a camera in my house?
Yes, of course I do.
You see, Huffington Post, I always knew it was a front for the CIA. But the Huffington Post is a media organization, it's a news organization, it's a 24-hour cycle, it's online, it never sleeps. Did you manage to inculcate that culture throughout the Huffington Post organization?
Absolutely. In fact, the Huffington Post, which is coming to South Africa next week, I'm delighted, has been a demonstration for me of how you can run a 24/7 media company and create a thriving culture. Because the truth, Bruce, is that every company is practically a 24/7 company, either because you are in media or because you have operations around the world in multiple time zones, or because you're a customer service company and customers need service at all times. So leaders need to learn to create teams. That's the answer. The answer is not to have people burning out. The answer is to learn how to delegate and how to create responsible teams that hold each other accountable, not just for their work product, but for how they sustain their own lives.
In male-dominated businesses, trading environments, for example, burnout is almost a badge of honor for some.
It is a badge of honor, and that has to change. And one of the reasons I'm doing that is in the media platform of my new company, which is launching on November 30th. We are bringing in voices from CEOs, from people who are recognized as super successful, talking about their best practices. For example, Jeff Bezos talks about how he gets 8 hours of sleep, and he says this is best for Amazon shareholders. Because even if his decisions are 10% better, because he's operating on all cylinders, maximum cognitive performance, that's best for the bottom line. So we need more and more voices like that stress the importance of these best practices.
Are you finding acceptance? Because you're talking to, and they're probably clients of yours already, the likes of Accenture, JP Morgan,
Yes.
both top-end, high-performance, highly demanding global businesses.
Absolutely. What we are finding is that when people take our trainings or e-courses or open their eyes to the new science, they recognize that well-being is actually a performance enhancer. And athletes are ahead of business people in recognizing that. Kobe Bryant, Andre Iguodala from the Golden State Warriors, who is also an investor in my new company, they talk about prioritizing sleep and recharging makes them better on the court or in the field.
So last Monday in America, it was the night before the election that has changed the future forever. Did America forget to get enough sleep?
Well, what is very interesting is that, first of all, 43% of eligible voters did not even show up to vote, which I feel is an incredible failure of democracy, because as someone said, it's like treating your democracy like a football rather than a Fabergé egg, something very precious, which it is. And then among those who did turn up to vote, as you know, it's about equal, although it now looks as though Hillary Clinton has won the popular vote by close to 2 million votes, and the votes are still being counted. So there is also something archaic about the electoral college system, which has allowed Donald Trump to be the president-elect.
It allowed George W. Bush into power.
Yes.
It then has allowed Donald Trump into power, despite getting fewer votes.
Right. So I think the most important thing for elites and establishments everywhere to recognize is that we keep talking about the dangers of growing inequalities. And when I say we, I mean people on the left, on the right, academics, politicians, media leaders, they talk about that. But we haven't done enough. Yeah. And the dangers of that is opening the path for demagogues to come to power. It's an incredible lesson for any democracy around the world that people who are unfit for office are going to be gaining office if we don't do some fundamental things to address the growing inequalities and the people's despair about the future.
Famously, Donald Trump is somebody who brags about not needing sleep, something that you say is so pivotal to stability, decent decision-making, and a long-term view.
Yes, he actually wakes up in the middle of the night and retweets Mussolini. Or
Does he know Mussolini is dead? I wonder.
I wonder too. But I think the truth here is that, as you said earlier, a lot of men brag about sleep deprivation like a badge of honor, and that has to change. And that's why we need these new role models to talk about new best practices that makes them more effective leaders.
How do South African business leaders, whether you're in startup phase as you are again, and I don't want to stress an age thing, but to be north of what is a traditional retirement age,
yes.
To be in the startup phase, committing to being sensible, rationing time, rationing exposure, it's an inspirational story. Many South Africans could learn a lot from it. What are the big lessons?
I think here is one unconventional big lesson, which is to recognize that when we're doing something we love, which I hope a lot of the South African leaders watching are doing, when we bring joy to what we're doing, it makes us more effective. When we are running on empty, we're not going to bring joy to what we're doing. We're going to go through our to-do list and cross items off. And that's the time when actually we're going to be more likely to miss the red flags, because we're drowning in data and starved for wisdom. And I know from my own life that the biggest mistakes I made as a leader where mistakes are made in a state of exhaustion. When I just wanted to cross something off my to-do list, I made terrible hiring mistakes. When I say terrible, every hiring mistake is a terrible mistake, because it sort of basically takes so much energy to then course correct and takes you off the path you are leading on. And any sleep-deprived leader can actually testify to hiring mistakes. Bill Clinton, who famously also bragged about his sleep deprivation, has said that the biggest mistakes I made, he said, I made when I was started. He did not specify what mistakes, but don't we all wish he had gotten a good night's sleep? So impulse control is also something that is much easier when you're not sleep deprived.
But taking that first step is quite a courageous first step, because it's doing something differently, and that can be hard.
But that's a function of leadership. We celebrate leaders who disrupt the current way of doing things. What I'd like to do now is to disrupt the way we work and live and demonstrate better results. In fact, we are bringing in academic institutions to measure the ROI, to measure the return on investment, to make it clear this is not some new agey, flaky idea. This is actually good for the bottom line. So we're working with Adam Grant and the Wharton School, for example, with Accenture, to measure the impact of our work. The same way that Mark Bertolini, the CEO of Aetna, worked with the Duke University to measure the impact of his well-being policies. And in the first year, they found a 7% reduction in healthcare costs and a 62-minute-a-week improvement in productivity. Because just think of it, Bruce, right now Gallup shows us that only 13% of employees around the world are engaged in their jobs. Lack of engagement is everything. Who cares if you have your employees at work, if they're updating their Facebook status or texting each other, instead of actually being creative and truly productive?
Make it a worthwhile place to be. Arianna Huffington, what a pleasure to have you. Thank you very much
for
joining us on this latest edition of The Moneymakers. Arianna Huffington, founder of the Huffington Post and founder of a brand new global business called Thrive Global, putting people to sleep everywhere. Thank you so much for watching, and have a very good evening. Good night, and switch off your phone. Bye-bye.